Okay, I'm going to start then. Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Stefanski. I work for the World Meteorological Organization here in Geneva, Switzerland. I am the co-lead of the Integrated Drought Management Program. And also I deal with applications, climate applications to agriculture, energy, and health. This side event has been organized by the convening organizations of the Drought Preparedness Working Group of the Global Framework for Water Scarcity in Agriculture under a Changing Climate, WASAG, that is our acronym. And this working group focuses on identifying practical solutions that deal with droughts and their impact on agriculture, livestock, food nutrition, and security. I'm pleased to welcome you to the session on integrated drought resilience in a changing climate. As many of you know, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6th assessment report was just released. It states unequivocally that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. Human-induced climate change has contributed to increases in agricultural and ecological droughts in some regions due to increased land evapotranspiration. Basically, the warmer the atmosphere, the more water can be dried out and put into the atmosphere. Dr. Svoboda's talk, the keynote, will reference this quite strictly. As you know, several temperature records were broken across Southern Europe and North Africa in the last few weeks. These records still need to be verified by WMO. I can't stress this enough. These are the kind of temperatures, we're talking about 48 degrees Celsius, are what the IPCC report is stating about the future if greenhouse gas emissions are not slowed. In fact, talking to many climate experts, we're talking about even in Europe and many regions above 50 degrees Celsius. So some housekeeping notes. Please introduce yourself in the chat by typing your name, institution, and location in the chat. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded on the World Water Week YouTube channel. All materials will have copyright permissions. Please, to have a productive call, everyone will be muted except the speakers. If you'd like to ask a question or make a statement, please use the chat function, which is being monitored. This will let the team know when you have something to say or to contribute. Again, to stress the summary, the purpose of the session is to highlight the need for innovative, integrated, collaborative drought management approaches in the context of a changing climate. I would like to now invite Dr. Mark Svoboda, Director of the U.S. National Drought Mitigation Center, with his keynote presentation on changing our mindset on managing droughts in a warming climate. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Bob, and welcome everybody to our session. It's my pleasure to kick off this esteemed panel, stimulate some discussion, and hopefully maybe change your mindset a little bit about how we view drought in terms of policy planning and response. What do I mean by flash drought? As many of you on this call or webinar today know, drought is often referred to primarily as a creeping, slow onset disaster. What I'd like to talk to you about today, however, is changing our mindset to recognize, especially in a warming climate through the lens of the recent IPCC report, that droughts indeed can be rapid onset, rapid intensification events. And this is a definition we put a team of scientists, including myself, did for the American Meteorological Society's meteorology glossary. And I think one key word that's in there, in addition to the rapid onset and intensification wording, is impacts. Can you have a drought if you don't have any impacts? So where we're going with that is it's not just about duration. A rapid onset flash drought can manifest itself into any of the other types of droughts over time if conditions allow it to do so. So a rapid onset drought could eventually turn into a hydrological drought or agricultural drought, et cetera. The key here, though, is the rapid onset and intensification. And we're going to go through some examples of that here. Now, in the literature, this term's been around for almost 2 decades now, but really caught on in the early 2010s, around 2012 to be specific. There's some work here done recently by Akin et al., a review of flash drought in the literature. This is now, I'm seeing this internationally, requests for reviews, it seems like every week on flash drought topics internationally. So it's certainly not just a phenomena suited to the US. And then there was an International Global Change Institute sponsored workshop on subseasonal to seasonal forecasting and prediction. And the results of that were put in a Nature paper by Pendergrass et al. In 2020, looking at flash droughts and the challenge that they present as a new paradigm for prediction. Then most recently, the very extensive literature review done by the National Integrated Drought Information System team here in the US went into literature, and real recently in December of 2020, that looks at everything that was out there at the time of their study. So we're starting to see a lot more work done in this area and recognition of this type of drought. How did this come about? Well, we're looking here at some of the first examples. When I first used the term, was a rapid developing, intensifying drought in the southern plains of the US back in the early, 2000 to be specific. And here you could see on the top left, the map with a lot of white, no drought, or yellow, maybe just sort of dry, but not really technically drought yet. And then you can fast forward just a couple months later, and we see widespread severe to extreme drought in the oranges and reds that weren't there prior. So this is a case of both coming from no drought, particularly in the middle state here, and Oklahoma, and then in Kansas where it was white, and going to see degradation of 2 or 3 classes within just a few weeks. This is what we would call a rapid onset intensifying drought. The drought that really put, I'd say, flash drought on the map, however, was 2012. This was a very extreme drought right in the primary agricultural region of the United States, our breadbasket, if you will. And here you can see on the left an example of again, the midsection of the United States. On the bottom, you can see what we do, these change maps, which shows over a 3-month time, we were seeing 4 to 5 class degradation, literally in just a 60 to 90 day period. On the right, a more recent high plains, we call it, regional sort of flash drought developed that really affected livestock, forage and feed that came on very quickly in summer of 2017. This was also a very iconic flash drought that developed over just a few weeks' time. The bottom right shows you that those oranges and browns and dark browns, many classes of degradation in just 6 to 8 weeks. So this was something that folks were struggling to get their minds wrapped around, as far as how do you respond to droughts that happen this quickly? And this changes the whole perspective of resource managers, political types, those that are governing, and people that deal with producers and stakeholders on the ground. It's a whole different way of thinking of drought than just saying, oh, we've got months or years to develop a water supply or worry about it then. You know, politicians' time horizon is very short. They're only in office a couple of years typically. So typically they could just kick that can down the road and say, well, the next person will deal with this. Well, these sorts of droughts are changing the way we think about it. So we also need to think about different tools to help us augment our in situ networks, which are sometimes very sparse and scattered and not evenly distributed. So we're now augmenting and trying to capture, as you can see in the cartoon on the top right, the hydrologic cycle is here. We're using remotely sensed data in gridded format at very high resolution and pretty good latency, so not a lot of lag time between when the satellite captures the environmental parameters, such as precipitation, soil moisture, vegetation stress in the form of NDVI anomaly, and then potential evapotranspiration or evapotranspiration. So we have a lot of tools here along the bottom now, and a lot of these are indeed available globally, not just in the US. I'm just showing an example here of the work we did here at the Drought Center. So let me finish with a couple of slides just to phrase the conversation, and then we'll get some more feedback and some input from our panel. One important point right up front, when I talk about drought early warning, is simply it's not just about prediction and forecasting. Of all the hazards, drought is, two things. One, very analogous with climate change in that it has a very potentially large spatial footprint and a very potentially large temporal footprint. So diligent monitoring is indeed critical on how we plan and deal and make decisions on managing resources and water supply in that context. Whether it's, again, at that subseasonal to seasonal forecasting, they all have an important role in informing a well-rounded comprehensive drought early warning system. The challenge of taking these products, however, from research to operations is still large. As you know, I'm sure many of you know, getting something into the operational realm is no easy task, and sustaining it over time. The other thing that makes drought very difficult too is that it's a number of factors. I showed the hydrologic cycle picture there, in that no one single driver is 100% of the answer. So we need to look at 100% of the data, but 100%, no one piece of that data is 100% of the answer, if you follow my meaning. But I believe that flash drought can serve as sort of the torchbearer for drought early warning, because it's going to show this onset sooner than having a slow onset paradigm or mindset that, we've got months or years to deal with this issue. And that's simply just not the case. And it's oftentimes used in that way because people use that as an excuse for not taking action. It should be linked to the 3-pillar approach of monitoring and early warning, where we're at risk and vulnerable being the middle pillar, and then the 3rd pillar being what can we do from a mitigation, policy, and response standpoint. We need to link all 3 of these together, and that's where a good, diligent monitoring and early warning system is key. So there really is no excuse for having drought catch us by surprise. It's typically that is human nature, though, as I show here in the hydrological cycle on the top right, is apathy is always going to be something we have to overcome with just virtually every hazard, not just drought, but drought more so because of the way it develops. So just a final thought or two to wrap up. To me, it isn't necessarily about needing more tools or even new tools, although that's always great. It's more now not about a tool set, it's about our mindset and how we plan and think about dealing with drought and drought early warning systems, and what goes into that, and how do we disseminate that to the public and to resource managers and stakeholders and producers on the ground. So I don't think we can let the slow onset mentality be the only doctrine. There are still these conventional droughts, whatever you want to call them, that do take months or years to develop and can last multiple years or decades. We're going through a 20-year drought in the Western United States right now and parts of the West. So it covers the whole continuum from days to decades. But we need to pay more attention now to the days and weeks and not just the decades or the multiple year droughts. And that needs to be built into that 3-pillar approach that gets into planning and policy and risk and vulnerability, identifying at-risk areas in our economy and in our demographics in our society. So just like with every other kind of drought, there isn't just one definition of flash drought. I've proposed to you today what we've been looking at here. But my main point in all of this, if you can take away one thing from my presentation today, is to start to have decision makers, policy makers, resource managers, and agricultural producers start to think on a shorter timeline and decision-making timeline or horizon when it comes to drought, not just these long monthly, multi-year, or even decadal sort of droughts, that we can begin to integrate that into our normal dealings and early warning systems for drought, and how we integrate them into practice and policy going forward. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I know we're holding questions until the end. And so at this time, I'd like to stop sharing my screen, and I will turn it back over to our moderator here, Valentin, going forward. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mark. This was very, very enlightening, but also scary, I especially like that you had this positive message that it could be a torchbearer to really improve the early warning on droughts. So thank you very much for this. I'm Valentin Eich. I'm with the Global Water Partnership and also work for the Integrated Drought Management Program Secretariat together with my WMO colleagues, the World Meteorological Organization. So for the following panel discussion, we have a very illustrious round of representatives of organizations with very different expertise and perspectives on drought. And I invite you to write your opinions, questions, comments into the chat, which we will monitor and then later on pick up for the Q&A session, or the panelists will directly answer them in the chat. So for the sake of time, I will not introduce each speaker in detail, but I would like to ask you to the audience to find more information on the session website about our dear panelists. So dear colleagues, thanks a lot for joining today's session. I will introduce you shortly, and I would start with three questions. Not really three questions, but three main insights or challenges of integrated drought management that you experienced recently. And I will start with Rachel McDonald, who is Deputy Director General of Research for Development of the International Water Management Institute, IMI. So Rachel, what are your three main points you want to highlight about integrated drought management?
Thank you, Valentin, and thank you also to Mark and Bob for setting the scene. I'm going to give you some points from a project we have called MENA Drought. It's looking at drought in the Middle East, North Africa. It's a US-funded and a project with the University of Nebraska. And we experienced a flash drought in 2013, 2014. It's about 4 months, but the damage that it wrought was incredible. So I reiterate what Mark was saying about how important those flash droughts are. In terms of the 3 points, I'm going to take the 3 pillars that the IDMP has. So pillar 1 is about early warning systems monitoring, pillar 2 is about vulnerability and impact assessment, and pillar 3 is about mitigation, preparedness and response. So pillar 1, one of the things that we have found is, following Nebraska's mantra, keep it simple. Those early warning systems, we can bring in the most sophisticated technology, but we have to make sure that they are embedded in the organizations that we will leave once the project is finished. So keep it simple and use the best data, but make it operational is important. And something that we're seeing increasingly is please include seasonal forecasting as well. Knowing where the drought is now, but actually knowing 2 to 3 months ahead, that's really what the ministries of water or agriculture or health or economics want to have. Pillar 2, vulnerability and impact assessment. This is this extensive study where we go and find out what has been the impacts in the past and what have been the vulnerabilities. So in Jordan, Lebanon, and Morocco, we found very different experiences of that drought, and that blueprint that we developed has been useful so many times going forward. It was like the baseline, and from that we have used it to emphasize the importance of our work to governments, to agencies, to many other areas like that. So do undertake that assessment. And then number 3 is that mitigation, preparedness and response. And what we see there is the need for long-term investment in institutional capacity. There is very little anticipatory risk management in any country in the world. So please, as we look at those projects, make sure there's enough time to bring not only that drought action plan that we can write relatively quickly, have that institutional engagement and the capacity development to then implement that for the next 5 years and 10 years, because that's where we need those changes to come in and the actions to help relieve the impacts of drought on particularly the marginal communities. Back to you, Valentin.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I couldn't agree more with all 3 points, especially the lack of investment for capacity building. Thank you very much. So next, I would like to ask Caroline King Okumu, who is partner at the Borders Institute, to come here also on the stage. And please answer the question. What are the 3 highlights, main points, takeaways that you want to bring into the round?
Okay, thanks, Valentin. I'm Caroline King Okumu from the Borders Institute, which is a small not-for-profit based in Nairobi. The 3 points that I want to make following Mark's super talk. The first one, I think I should say a word maybe in defense of the slow onset mentality. And then my second 2 points would be reasons why I still really enjoyed Mark's talk. So just very briefly, the idea of our work on slow onset, and many of the colleagues on this call have been working on this in different ways, is to draw attention to the fact that there is plenty of time to prepare ahead of droughts, and it is much more cost effective to prepare against droughts than to cope with the impacts and the consequences. So that's really the thinking behind the strands of work on slow onset events and some of the engagement that various colleagues on the call have had now with that work stream under the UNFCCC. After this talk, I'll share some links maybe in the chat. But having made that defense, why I really liked Mark's talk about the flash droughts is that he has shared with us this very impressive array of tools that he and other colleagues are using to observe flash droughts. And these are really useful. So some of us have been enjoying discussing these with Mark in the context of his work with the Intergovernmental Working Group on Drought. I can see many members of the Intergovernmental Working Group actually with us on this call, including the chair, Gunilla Borkland, and some other colleagues who've been very kind to join us today. So that's a really super aspect of this work on flash droughts. And the other thing, of course, that I loved about Mark's talk is the way that he's engaging with decision-making timeframes. And those are my 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for these 3 insights. The next on our list now is Anil Mishra, the Chief of Section Hydrological Systems and Water Scarcity of Unesco. Anil, you heard the questions. What are your 3 highlights, main points or challenges that you want to share with the audience in regard of integrated drought management? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Valentin. Thank you for having me. I would like to highlight once again monitoring and early warning of drought, which is an essential part of drought risk management. And I would like to highlight within the perspective of UNESCO's Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, which really provide access to data and policy recommendation for integrated drought management, but also promotes international scientific cooperation and facilitates knowledge sharing and capacity building. We have heard about lots of data issues are also in Mark's talk, but the data is limited to regional and national scale at a coarse resolution and provide little feedback to local community. We have been doing local case studies, developing and implementing of an open source, open access, high resolution drought monitoring and early warning system, which has been established in Southern Africa and Latin America. The system provides operational in a near real time and provides gridded information, the condition of precipitation, evaporation, runoff stream flow, drought index. And the most important aspect is really providing training and capacity building. And recently we have established a drought early warning platform for Southern African countries like Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, and so on and so forth. And this short-term forecast is also available for 7 days, which was actually highlighted in Mark's talk also, into the future and displaying information on expected changes in the hydrological variable and drought index. These platforms are openly accessible and provide near real-time hydrological drought monitoring and forecasting. And based on these tools and outcome, we then provide policy advice. We recently published a drought atlas for Latin America, which is available from UNESCO's website. We are working on developing a drought atlas for Africa. So this aspect of education and capacity building, I really want to highlight, and the policy recommendation. And with that, within the framework of upcoming UNESCO's strategic phase, Science for a Water Secure World in a Changing Environment will continue to work with member states to provide data and knowledge so that they can have adequate forecasting system in their places. And that's where I want to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anil, for all these insights. I especially like that you pointed out the issue with open data and access to data, and that's especially in Africa, for example, a big thing since droughts are not a national problem but a basin problem. Yes. So our next speaker, we are very proud that she had the time to join us, is Ms. Nurhan Abdel Azim, and she's governance member of the Water Youth Network. And she will also please answer the three highlights that we are proposed to all participants and tell us what she thinks are the main challenges at the moment. Thank you very much, Nora.
Yeah, thank you, Valentine. Thank you, everyone here. I'm very happy to be here representing youth fears and ambitions regarding drought issue. So the first thing and the most important thing in my point of view is to identify very well the emerging types of droughts. Actually, day after day, the word drought become very wide, and the IPCC report just released this month differentiated clearly between meteorological, agriculture, and hydrological droughts. Also, Victoria State in Australia identified the artificial drought, differentiating upstream uses, which may cause some shortage in downstream. And for sure, the most critical case having a coincidence between the natural drought types and artificial ones. So the better we identify the sort of droughts that we are facing, the better we can allocate resources and mitigate the impacts. Second, another very important point I would like to share with you today is mitigation. Whenever we hear climate, drought, rain, flood, we think only about adaptation because, those are natural things. All we can do is find a way to adapt with. However, recent studies showed that there are many human-induced factors that are escalating the severity and frequency of those climate things and droughts, since we are talking about drought today. For instance, like when you tell someone, especially talking to youth, the very basic thinking about how to adapt with a drought period. Okay, simply let's build a dam, store water, and use this water in the drought periods. However, those dams or large reservoirs are a main source of methane, greenhouse gases that escalating the global warming and hence escalating the severity and frequency of drought. So we have to carefully choose our adaptation measures to not escalate or causing else negative consequences that we don't need. Third and last point is that what is going on in this session and Water World Week and else events is perfect and essential, but we represent what? 1% of global population, how we can convey science and our findings to the people in the streets, the 99% here and there everywhere, which are the most influenced by climate change and the main contributor to climate change as well. So if you tell someone, for example, in my opinion, the best time is now for this awareness. If you tell someone, for example, 20 years from now, global warming temperature increase will exceed the 1.5 degrees Celsius, so what? Nothing. 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, nothing. But if we mention that this serious weather we witness now, wildfire, fire weather here and there, deaths here and there are caused by only 1.1 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, they will start to, I would like to help. I have to do something regarding drought issue. And for sure, it become more challenging talking to farmers, illiterate people, developing countries, and things like that. Final thing I would like to say is that the Water Youth Network that I'm proudly to be part of is doing a great job regarding awareness issue. and you can check our website and the project on our website. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nurhan. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, specifically your last point about awareness and communication, I think this is really where we can still learn a lot from the youth movement, and which needs to be strengthened, absolutely, yeah. So our next speaker, which I would like to pose the question, is Sabina Buchhals. She is a colleague of mine of the Global Water Partnership. She's Senior Program Manager, and she's also head of IDMP Central and Eastern Europe. So Sabina, you heard the question about the 3 main points on drought integration, integrated drought management. So the floor is yours, please.
Yes, thank you, Valentin, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. So I will start to just briefly mention the IDMP program, which was already mentioned a few times today, and then I will present 2 concrete examples and of the activities that we did in our region. So the Global Water Partnership and World Meteorological Organization back in 2013 launched this joint integrated drought management program with a purpose to address drought issues more effectively. So as we heard, the IDMP promotes building drought resilience through proactive response. It supports stakeholders at all levels, with providing policy and management guidance and by sharing scientific information, knowledge, and best practices. We already heard that it has a 3-pillar approach, so I'll not repeat again. And of course, there are some global activities going on, but there are several regional activities around the globe. And with the next 2 points, I want to show, yes, the 2 concrete examples of activities we did in Central Eastern Europe. So in Central Eastern Europe, we started with a program also back in 2013, and together with 40 different organizations from the region, we designed our own regional IDMP program based on these 3 pillars. And the core of our work at the beginning were on one side, the dialogues and exchanges with different stakeholders, and on the other side, implementing concrete demonstration projects, which were addressing and testing different risk management approaches and measures. So at the beginning, we held over 30 national dialogues, and together with stakeholders, we shaped the guidance on how to prepare a drought management plan, which was based on the guidance provided by the global IDMP. So this was like a template for countries to organize institutions and plan steps for better preparedness for drought. And it was great timing because at that time, actually, Slovakia announced the work on the Slovak National Drought Plan, which was officially then adopted in 2017. And this was a major achievement also for IDMP and a really good case for other countries in the region, how to actually implement the steps that we define in the guidance and do the plan. So they could relate to the Slovak cases because they had a similar situation as Slovakia. So the second example is a bit more practical, and it was done in cooperation with our most important strategic partner, which is the Drought Management Center for Southeastern Europe. Together with them and with the help of additional EU funding, we expand the partnership and activities throughout the Danube region and started with so-called Dry Danube project. One of the key results of that project was the Drought Watch tool, which you can actually check. I will paste the link in chat later on. It's a web-based tool using combination of national data and remote sensing data and providing an overview of the drought status and drought development in the region. So that would be all from my side. Thank you. You are muted.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you, Sabina. That was very insightful, and looking forward to the further discussion. So the last colleague that I would like to interview here on the 3 main issues in the recent past on integrated drought management is Mishra Salman, who is Senior Land and Water Officer with the Food and Agricultural Organizations, FAO. So Mishra, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Valentin, for inviting us. Actually, as an introduction to the 3 key points, I would like to start with what is recently confirmed by the latest IPCC report, indicating an increasing trend and intensity of drought in at least 12 drying regions across the globe. That's already threatening. So, as key points, what is really importantly needed is a decisive shift towards coordinated approaches to go beyond traditional silos management modalities of drought. Silos management may respond when drought events strike, but do not prove effective in mitigating long-term impacts. This has been key in FAO's work, either as normative or field programs or projects in countries, in member countries of the organization. Second is partnerships that we all after in drought community, as they are key to promote interventions in this direction of coordinated approaches and guide investment towards the mostly vulnerable communities or targets, while at the same time develop capacities for the design of tailored measures and integrated solutions that combine drought resilient management of resources. And third is the recognition of the existence of a human fingerprint on global drought patterns, and the role played by human-caused climate change in the intensification of the phenomenon itself. That would reflect the need for informed planning, resting on the agreed 3 principles of integrated drought management, and sets the ground to enhance preparedness as key to combating drought. Recently in FAO's work and in collaboration with the UNCCD, I emphasize here on the enabling activities for implementing the UNCCD COP drought decisions as an initiative to support a number of countries into the implementation of what they have already as national drought plans, but in an integrated drought management. To conclude here, we need to act fast and consistently, encouraging the integrated management of resources and enhance preparedness as key, and that is from the communities to the institutional level. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Maher. So I would like to ask all panelists to put themselves in the spotlight. And I would encourage the audience, please, again, to pose questions in the Q&A. I can see that there are comments coming now in, but for the beginning, I would like to ask Mark, you again a question. So you very well explained flash droughts and what challenges they really bring to us. How do you see like the relation to climate change? I think there are several factors that really are intensified by climate change that will make the likelihood of flash droughts more likely, perhaps even in a nonlinear mode. Perhaps you can a little bit explain that again.
Yeah, thank you, Valentin. I agree. I think that would be the hypothesis. You know, when I showed that cartoon of the hydrologic cycle and the remote sensing parameters that we can measure now, I think the premise is that increased temperatures are going to speed up water moving through that cycle. Maybe longer growing seasons, more in the form of rain instead of snow in those areas that rely on snowpack to melt out gradually for irrigation during the dry seasons. So this is going to have implication and impact. And I think we're already seeing that, quite frankly. And secondly, just to be clear, I view flash drought as in addition to, not in place of, the slower burning onset of traditional drought. That's where I think there's also an analogy to climate change. And again, as I mentioned in my talk, droughts, unlike every other hazard, are going to potentially cover huge areas and last a long time. And so that's, if we can learn to better deal with droughts now, it's really an analog to how you can deal and plan and manage climate change. It's sort of the frog in the pot, you know, it warms up slowly. The frog doesn't realize it until it's too late and jumps out. So I think drought offers a couple of different ways that we can pursue an integrated drought risk management approach. And the whole premise of the flash drought is, with increased temperatures and speeding up of water through the cycle, we need to be very mindful of that. And we can't just think that we have all the time in the world with drought. And we need to redesign how we think about our drought early warning systems. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Yeah, I mean, at the end, it always comes to the point, no, proactive and integrated. Yes. Thanks a lot. I see in the chat that my colleague Bob Stefanski has a comment to make. Bob, I invite you as well to make this comment.
Just very quickly, and I think the IPCC report is very sobering, and Mark's presentation is quite apt in that, I think we have to stress that, when the atmosphere warms, there's far more evaporation. So even if rainfall stays the same, we will have less water in some ecosystems and in some environments. So I think that's something we need to stress over and over again. And it's the same thing. And for our colleagues, we're talking about the dry end of the water cycle. And with the issue of climate change, with more evaporation, you have more moisture evaporating, you have more moisture in the atmosphere, and you have more rainfall. And that's where we see, the floods in Germany and elsewhere. So this is really a double-edged sword that we have to face for many of our ecosystems and stakeholders. Over.
Yes, thanks a lot, Bob. The Clausius-Clapeyron equation, yes. So Mark, I see in the chat that you wanted to respond directly to Bob. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Bob always does a good job of filling in where I forget things. So thank you, Bob. Really quick point or two along what Bob was just saying, because I could not agree more. The other thing, I think, characteristics of the rainfall cycle with the warmer atmosphere holding more water is more heavy events, right, that run off. And more importantly, so you can have more rain and then higher evapotranspiration. But secondly, I think the thing we're already seeing now, in addition to longer growing season, is more days in between rain events or dry days. So this is another thing where flash drought can accelerate that process too. So I just wanted to bring in the dry day element, the days between rain events, and the fact that when we do get rains, they're very heavy and they can run off very quickly. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And then we have the connection to flash floods as well. Yeah, and erosion. I see that Maher has a comment as well. Maher, the floor is yours.
Yeah, actually, a quick one actually from Bob and Mark. One would also see how we manage flood also, and not only drought. And that is coming now more and more to see how to manage drought and flood and what is common in management, though different phenomenon we have actually.
Thanks a lot, Maher. And I use this opportunity to invite everybody also to the session tomorrow that we have of IDMP and APFM together on the integration of flood and drought management. So at the moment we don't have comments. I can't see. I see a question of Aidan Biddle. How do non-arid like mine countries get the message about droughts to the public and users? So it's the question about awareness and media messaging of the short high intensity droughts in North England was incredibly difficult. Our government didn't want to cause alarm and water companies didn't want to either. The faster we went, the quicker everything is fine changes to an incident. So perhaps Nurhan, since you raised this issue with awareness and communication, perhaps you want to respond to that question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, in my point of view, it's totally our responsibility how to convey our scientific talking into the normal people everywhere. And I think there's a lot of institutions that are willing now to contribute or to share those thoughts in words. Many institutions participating in this session and else institutions are doing projects, implementing projects as a part of drought plans or drought management plans. So one part of those projects has to be awareness. Please, when you are going to implement a project somewhere, talk to the people there directly. Tell them we are doing this project, we are facing 1, 2, 3. And I think when people feel the impact themselves, they will start to work harder, protect the plans, help in implementing those management plan. So I think it's our responsibility to convey, to facilitate reaching our key messages to the even children. We can start now with the children everywhere talking about climatic changes and to lead them to a better future themselves. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Norhan. I mean, especially the children aspect, they are the ones that have to live with climate change for a longer time. Yes. I see that Sabina wants to add to this answer. Sabina, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add, because we were facing the same challenge as it was mentioned in a comment in our region, because as you know, we have 1 day, one month floods, and the next period is the drought. So what we did also in part of the IDMP program was we tried to focus a little bit more on increasing the awareness and knowledge among the journalists, because they are usually the ones who communicate with public directly, and usually they focus on reporting the costs or the damages that drought costs, and not really focusing on to changing their perception of drought, and why is it important that they communicate about drought already before and or during drought development and not just after. So yeah, we try to get to that group of people with providing some guidance. Also, we were planning to organize some training events, some interactive trainings to face the scientists and journalists together to discuss this topic. But then due to the COVID situation, we couldn't actually implement those training yet, but this is the plan, yeah, how we want to actually tackle this challenge as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sabina. I think, yeah, it's important to take the media by the hand there and really guide them into how to best spread these news. Rachel, you have worked on similar ways. Perhaps you can also add to that as well.
Thank you. What a great question about how do we take it beyond the scientists. So in our work in Morocco, Jordan, and Lebanon, one of the breakthroughs that we had was the ministry, one of the main ministries we're working with, endorse the drought monitoring to be put on a public website. So that means everybody can see the state, they can see this. This is, in many of the countries we work, there are many dimensions to that drought information. And so there was this notion, because drought management was being put into place, there was a very good action plan, that drought monitoring being put onto the website, and so then media can see it. Many people can see it. People know they're experiencing it, but then being able to manage and show where it is and how intense it is was a really important part of that step. So I do think that having that information readily at hand is important. Back to you, Valentin.
Thanks a lot, Rachel, for these insights. Yeah, there was also a question in Spanish in the audience. So how to measure the potential impacts before they occur? Of course, this is a very difficult thing, probably modeling, but I can see, I think Anil can perhaps provide a response to that.
Well, I want to add on to the previous question, particularly on awareness raising, 2 components. One, citizen science. Engaging citizens in monitoring using low-cost sensor now is really providing lots of information, but also validating and calibrating the information. And the second, also using indigenous knowledge. We are working with a pastoral community so that the scientific methodology is integrated with the indigenous knowledge system that can really provide awareness raising program very effective in that sense. Back to you, Valentin.
Thanks a lot, Anil, to add on the awareness part. I think this is really important. Then I would like to have a combined question then to Mark again from our Spanish guest. So what do you think, how can we anticipate the occurrence of these events in order to take actions for social mitigation? And then the other one on your talk was, have these been validated, or is it necessary to validate the map that you provided at the local level? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions and for being a part of the session. Yeah, I'll take the second question first. In regards to validation, very critical. The maps I showed you for the US case study we have a validation network of around 450 plus experts around the country that see the drafts, provide impact information, provide data, visual evidence. Maybe they work with stakeholders directly, university extension. So there's a wide diversity of expertise in the validation network. In other countries I work with, developing sort of a more automated combined drought indicator approach, similar to what Anil spoke to, in say South America or Africa or Asia. There we work with our stakeholder at the various ministerial level to find the appropriate stakeholders on the ground. So all of these maps need to be validated. We're not just throwing a model out there that is accepted as truth without it being confirmed on the ground. So I'm a very big proponent and believer in bringing that into the process. And going back to the original sort of question about impacts, this is a real gap globally. The systematic collection of impacts in the same way that we collect precip or temperature or any other kind of data, we don't have a real good baseline for impacts. It's very ad hoc. It's okay, a drought happened, let's document it. But we need to have the baseline, what we call condition monitoring in both good times and bad times and sort of normal, because we know there's no such thing as normal. So that's my first answer. And then now I forgot the first question. So you have to repeat it, Valentin.
No worries. The first question was also from in Spanish. Wait, I have to go up the chat again. No, this was actually the first question. The other one was how to validate the potential impact.
So I did answer, I think I did answer both then.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I did talk about validation, I did talk about impacts, and I know Mark.
Sorry, Mark, you answered this the second one first. Yes.
No worries. I thought I might have blended those together, but I know Maher might have wanted to speak about impacts too. But I think I'm good then. Thank you.
Yes, given the time, I think Maher and also Rachel might add to the shortly to this question, because we have other questions and we have perhaps another 1 or 2 questions that we can have before I hand over to Daniel for the final summary. So Maher, up to you. Over to you.
I mean, preparedness here, we should not see it only as forecasting, but when we want to be ready, then we have to have solutions that are tailored to local conditions. So, and then apply them. Otherwise, we're lacking the response while we are forecasting the phenomena. So it's a cycle. It's a process. But being prepared, emphasis should be put on solutions. Those solutions are in fact integrated, combined, but importantly reflecting the local needs of communities and reflecting local conditions. Thanks, Valentine.
Thanks, Maher. Rachel, you want to add to that again?
I just want to add, there's a whole set of experiments, research that's going on at the moment about forward forecasting of droughts. And so what we can do is we can use artificial intelligence. We can begin to predict where the drought might be, the intensity of the drought. It might be in a month or 2 months' time. And then actually linking that to payments. And there's a whole discussion, do we make the payments before the drought actually happens? Because that allows people to mobilize their responses. But of course, this is very tricky. Imagine that you're forecasting a drought and it doesn't happen. So you've made payments to many people that didn't happen. So it's an experimental area, but it really doesn't get down to impacts. As Mark said, we start with a very low knowledge base, database of those impacts anywhere you might go. So forward forecasting impacts is very difficult. It's difficult enough forward forecasting the actual drought itself. So back to you, Valentin.
Thanks a lot, Rachel. I think this also answers all the answers now about predictive capacity, answers also the question in the chat of Alejandro Deeb. So perhaps we can have one more question from the chat before I hand over to Danielle. The question was from Lida Canio Pecha-Roman. All the wonderful panelists have touched upon the need to direct more resources to raise awareness among stakeholders. Are there examples of successful instances where participatory planning was employed to prepare for drought management? Has anybody of the panelists an example on hand where participatory planning really helped to improve the situation and for better planning? Anil, I see that you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I could give a couple of examples. Of course, within the framework of UNESCO's activities, we started with shared vision planning, in which UNESCO's biosphere reserves and local stakeholders were invited to share their issues and data and everything. So really participatory approach has been integrated when we implemented some of the drought monitoring system. I can go into the detail, but because of the timeline, I just wanted to highlight that. And there is also a program which we call Climate Risk Informed Decision Analysis, which starts with the shared vision planning workshop, in which we really invite participants to share their issues and challenges, including the data validation and calibration processes available at the local scale.
Thank you very much, Anil, for these examples. And with that, I thank you very much, all the panelists, for your participation and the great answers and the insights with all the different perspectives of your organizations and your background. And I'll hand over to Daniel Tsigai, who is Program Officer of the UN Convention for Combating Desertification. So over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Valentin. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It was a very great pleasure for me to be part of this session, and I learned a lot. It was very encouraging that stakeholders from different organizations coming together to discuss this drought pertinent issue. And I'm also honored to give a closing remarks for this extremely interesting and also important session. In this light, I would first like to thank the speakers, who are my dear colleagues, but also for sharing their insights on drought preparedness, and more generally for their leadership and great cooperation in the framework of the Global Framework for Water Scarcity in Agriculture. We call it WASAG. As closing remark, I would like to highlight the following points. One is there is an urgent need to galvanize global action towards addressing drought through dialogue and coordination, which probably will also give some kind of innovative solutions to guide policy. So there was a highlight on the need for capacity building at all levels, including ordinary citizens to raise awareness on drought, on all the three pillars that has been mentioned several times: early warning and monitoring systems, drought risk mitigation, and vulnerability assessment. The need for a paradigm shift from being reactive to proactive approach on drought management, and the relevance of integrating also advances in digital technology, climate smart water and agricultural solutions. And there was also a mention about integrating floods and droughts, which are increasing in impact and duration. So in this context, the context of flash drought that we have heard at the beginning of this session, and the impacts which we have witnessed recently also on food shortage, fires, heavy soil losses have serious and lasting effects on the land and the people who are living in this land. So how serious and what can we do about it? So our ability as generations to survive this extreme temperature, including floods and droughts, will depend on more than reversing the climate change. How prepared are we for drought, and how well the land and the human beings that we build can withstand these events to matter. So practical and science-based insights that the technical experts have shared today on the problem and also the solutions on droughts are important. Without them, decision makers cannot act decisively to tap to the potential that drought resilience can deliver for tangible benefits and greater well-being for drought. So droughts, as you all know, knows no political boundary. It is multifaceted, and its impact will be exacerbated by climate change. While drought impacts are strongly related to the interaction of humans and nature, the Anthropocene aspect. So the different vulnerabilities of droughts, including the use that we have heard, and gender perspectives need to be captured for effective mitigation, preparedness, and response. So the key point is coordinated action at all levels that responds to the various perspectives of drought is vital, and drought could be in the process a connector And it can also act as an opportunity. It's a disaster, but we can also use it as an opportunity for strengthened collaboration among countries, regional and sub-regional institutes, and international organizations in the implement of drought risk management and implementation plans. So we need to move away from silo thinking. In this context, I would like to just close by saying that an African proverb, if you want to go quickly, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. So coordinated action is very important, and we need to change our mindset on drought. We don't need only tool sets, as has been said, but mindset, the need for mindset change. Thank you. We have another drought session tomorrow on integrated drought resilience, especially on the same topic, but in the Southern Africa Development Community region at 9 p.m. So yeah, welcome to join us in this session as well. Thank you.